All right, well, very good. Well, thank you all for coming tonight. So we're going to be talking about chapter 5 in the Learning Buddhism book, the chapter on karma, cause and result, cause and effect. So tonight we need to do our opening prayers. So let me see. So Michael, would you like to do them tonight, please? And just once in English will be fine.
The opening prayers. Altruistic motivation. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Action Bodhicitta prayer. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. The long refuge prayer. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the yadams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Taking the Bodhisattva vow. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. The short refuge prayer. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. 4 immeasurables. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion.
Okay, thank you. That's very good. Okay, so karma, cause, and result. So when we study the 4 immeasurables, or the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma, we talked about that we have a precious human life, and realizing this is something that keeps us on the path, that puts us on the path of learning more, of understanding more, of understanding what the Dharma is. So 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. So the first one is a precious human life. The second one is impermanence, is recognizing that all things pass, that whatever we have now, whatever body we have, whatever possessions we have, whatever we think of nature and so on, that it is all impermanent, it all changes. And that can be a disquieting thought for many people. So many people seek understanding in the Dharma for that, to understand impermanence. Another thing is karma, cause and effect. So karma is the results of causes that come to us in the way of thoughts, and we take action, and karma literally means action, and then there is a result. So People recognizing that there is this karma, cause and effect, that if we do good things result. If we do bad things result. So understanding virtue and non-virtue becomes a cause for understanding the Dharma, for learning the Dharma, so that we can have good results, so that we're not caught in a web of negativity and suffering, that we can pull ourselves out through understanding karma, cause and effect. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. The fourth of the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma is the suffering of samsara. Samsara is this ocean of suffering that we say, that we use as an example, as a symbol of the life that we have. That there, in this life, there is all these changes that are happening, and all these things that result in our displeasure and our uncomfortableness and our ignorance. And so we want to know more about why we have this suffering or this pleasure. How do we have this happiness, and why don't I have more happiness? Or why I have so much suffering? Why do I have so much suffering? So that happiness and suffering is a direct relationship to the karma, to the action that we take. So the fourth thought is the suffering, the result of the karma. So those are the four thoughts of what it is that turns our mind to the Dharma and keeps us to the Dharma, because we're constantly working to understand and purify our understanding of the karma. So tonight we're talking about karma, cause and effect. So all karma, you have to excuse me, I got new glasses today and I'm still getting used to finding the sweet spot here. I'm looking at my notes and they're all going everywhere.
Lance, are they progressives?
Yes.
Yeah, I fell down a lot when I first got my progressives.
Yeah, well, I've been wearing them for many years. So
No, but like
getting
every
new
time
ones
you
is
get a new
always an interesting
prescription,
thing.
I just walk into things for a few days.
Yes, correct. So I'm having trouble reading right now. Okay. So we talked about in the past, not too long ago, we talked about the wheel of existence. We talked about that there were the 6 human realms. If you remember, the God realm, the demigod realm, or the jealous God realm, the human realm, and those were the 3 higher realms. And then the 3 lower realms are the animal realm and the hungry ghost realm and the hell realms. So these are the realms of human beings that we are in all the time. And we're some mixture of those realms. And it changes, from time to time. It's very dynamic and changes based on our behavior, the things that we think, the things that we do, and so on. So to understand those realms and how it is that we get into those realms is we need to understand the karma part of things. So if we do good deeds, we can wind up in the higher realms. If we're doing bad deeds, we wind up in the lower realms. But those realms can be functioning for us throughout the day. We might start off feeling like that we're in a God realm. And then as we progress through the day, we may slip into the animal realm, or we may find ourselves coming back to the human realm, or we may find ourselves ending the day by thinking that we're in a hell realm. So we talked about those things. And if you recall, you can get out your notes and so on. If you have any questions about it, we can talk about those. They're symbolic. It is the psychophysical drama of being a human being. So we use these illustrations of these 6 realms for us to understand the mindset that we're going through, this psychophysical drama that we go through all the time. So once again, it's the result of the karma that we do. So the karma, the actions that we do. So we can have negative things that we're thinking about, things come to us. We may have a situation where we don't quite understand, but somebody makes us angry. And we immediately want to have a response that is an equal anger response to them, because they're bringing anger to us. It's making anger in us. And then if we do that anger, then the result is definitely going to be something anger on the other side. There's going to be hatred on the other side. There's going to be very negative, very non-virtuous. But if we see that anger coming towards us and we recognize that anger as being anger, and I'm able to diffuse that anger, if I'm able to calm that anger down, at least within myself, that I'm not creating an action in anger. If I'm able to diffuse that, transform that, then the result is going to be a positive result. It's going to be a virtuous result. So we can transform that cause that is coming to us through our action to have the desired action that we want to have, which I think most people would want to be happy. They want to be positive. They want to be virtuous. So understanding what those causes are is very important. So if you remember, we've talked about the 5 poisons. So the 5 poisons make up all the different emotions we have. So the 5 poisons are hatred is one of them. Desire or attachment is another one of them. Ignorance or delusion is another of those poisons. And then jealousy or envy is another of those poisons. And then the 5th one would be greed or pridefulness. Those are the basic poisons that in all their myriad combinations form what we say are the 84,000 emotions that we as human beings are all subject to. So trying to understand 84,000 emotions by itself would be very difficult. But if we can go to the least common denominator of those and get to these 5 poisons, we can see that now we have a way of being able to apply the antidotes to those poisons. So if you remember that for each of the poisons, there's this antidote. And so for the poison of hatred, we have the antidote of being able to apply loving kindness, to be able to see wisdom. That if we understand that hatred is nothing more than something that has been fabricated, something that has been contrived in our minds, that we hate someone because of maybe something that they did, or somebody hates us for something that maybe we did or they think we did, that hatred is just like looking at something into a mirror. It's just an appearance. You know, it's a misinterpretation. It's a reflection of something with a bad, with a negativity that is not focused on the truthfulness of the situation. So this hatefulness is just something, like I said, that is just contrived. So an example of that would be, you know, that in our family, that we have cousins and we have an uncle and his children and his whole side of the family. We never get together with that side of the family because our family hates their family because they hate us. And we don't know why, but that's the way it's been since, you know, since we were children. And, but then we find out one day that it goes back, you know, to before we all were born. And our uncle maybe did something, took some money or did something like that, that created a rift in the family. And now everybody has this hatred for that side of the family. But meanwhile, it carries over into the children, it carries over to us, and carries over to everybody like that. So it is something that is contrived. It is something that if we look into it and we see and we find out what the reality of it is, we might find out that there was a misunderstanding that happened, and our uncle mistakenly wound up with that money because he misunderstood something that our father might have said or something like that. But the emotions were high. It never got resolved. And all these years has been this built up hatred. So the point is that we're looking at an appearance of what we think is this thievery that turned out to be only just a misunderstanding. And nobody meant any harm from it from the very beginning. But by showing loving kindness, by having forgiveness, by having grace, and being able to talk it out, being able to examine what is going on, what is causing this hatred, we may be able to release the tension, release the animosity, release the hatred that is building up, and so on. So when we see someone who is coming at us to be dramatic, if someone were coming at us and thinking that we are their enemy and they want to do harm for us, what we need to do is to be able to look at them and be able to diffuse the situation by realizing that there's something that is difficult with them, that they have some misconception, they have some idea that I am a threat to them, and they're coming at me with this negativity, with intent to do bad. I have to look into them and not say, oh, I've got to react with them with the same level of hatred that they're reacting with me. I need to diffuse it. I need to understand the cause of what it is that they're coming to me with. So maybe I need to be able to find words that we can talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's try and understand what's going on. And through that, there's a good possibility that we can get to the bottom of things. Things will be diffused. The action I take is that forgiveness, is that being able to help them to settle down, and for me not to meet that hatred with anger that is going to create a bad result. So I know that that's very idealistic and doesn't always work, but we have to have the intention to want to do that. We have to have the motivation to want to do that. Otherwise, we get caught into the cycle of here's aggression coming to me. I'm going to meet that with equal or greater aggression. And then the result is going to be more and more anger. So we need to find ways to forgive. We need to find ways to apply wisdom by examining, by looking into things, by understanding, by conversation, and so on. So the antidote to hatred is loving kindness, is wisdom, is forgiveness, being able to look into that. Then if we take the example of desire, so desire is attachment, wanting to have things and holding on to those things, and lust, passion, are all aspects of hatred, of desire. So if we can recognize desire that is coming towards us, that is building up with us, desire comes up within ourselves like hatred does, but desire doesn't come at us in the same way that hatred might come at us. Desire builds up within ourselves, within our mind, within our body, and so on. And we need to be able to withdraw. We need to be able to get perspective on that desire. Sometimes we can look at that desire as obsession. I have to have that. I have to have that relationship. I have to hold on to that relationship that I have with my lover. I have to have that car. I have to have that material object. I have this obsession, this attachment with that. I want that. So the antidote to that obsession, to that lust, to that passion is being able to get objective about it, to be able to cool down the obsession. So it means to withdraw, it means to go and sit down. It goes to meditate. It means to leave the situation in somewhere and gain some control with yourself to be able to get some objectivity on your desire, on the situation. So we need to look at things with a discriminating awareness, and we say, I'm too hot, I've got to cool down, and take the action to do that, rather than take the action to keep festering that I got to have this, and this desire builds and builds and builds and so on. With ignorance or delusion, which is the basis of all these emotions, this ignorance, this delusion that we tell ourselves, these lies that we tell ourselves, that we need to be able to diffuse those lies. We need to be able to understand those lies. We need to be able to recognize the delusions in which we are creating for ourselves. So delusion and ignorance is like darkness. It's one of the similes that we would use for that there's darkness. So the antidote to darkness is to illuminate, is to bring light into the darkness. So when we speak about ignorance, when we speak about delusion, we're talking about education. We're talking about techniques of education and being able to put ourselves into a situation where we can dive into, we can learn about, things that we have preconceived ideas about, or we think that we know everything, that we have this arrogance about things and so on. So we need to be able to illuminate our ignorance. We need to be able to diffuse our delusion through education. One of the best ways to do that, and particularly when we're talking about something like doctrine, like Buddhist doctrine and things like that, but not just that, even in your jobs and so on, where there's a lot of details and so on, is to be a teacher, is to instruct somebody. And what you find is, as you're instructing somebody, sometimes you catch yourself saying things that you don't really understand, or that you are twisting in such a way that you're making something that you're not sure about, or to be untruthful. You're twisting it to make it sound truthful for yourself, because you don't want to get caught into a lie. Sometimes those that you are teaching, that you are talking, will ask you questions, and it will challenge that which you think you know. And if you're honest with yourself and with the person and with the subject matter that you're talking about, that if you don't know, you'll say, I don't know about that, but let me educate myself or re-educate myself. Let me go back and investigate a little bit more, and I'll get back to you with maybe a better answer than the one I just tried to give you, the instruction that I tried to give you. So the point here is that in ignorance, where we don't know something, in delusion, we're creating a scenario where we are behaving like we do know something, and we begin to live a lie in many different ways. And some people, their whole lifetime is nothing but a lie. Sometimes it's just a little facet of their lifetime that they're living a lie. But the fundamental part here is the antidote to that is education. And we can use teaching as a means to be able to educate ourselves, to be able to recognize where the delusions are. And sometimes they're very hidden, they're very subtle. We don't recognize them because we built up such a wall of lies that we can't see through that. As we begin our career in spirituality and so on, and particularly as we meditate, these things come up. You know, the walls start coming down and these thoughts start coming up. So so that is something very powerful to us, and we recognize that, and we say, oh, I need to investigate this. And so many misconceptions, many preconceived ideas come up to us in our meditation, and we reinvestigate and purify our knowledge and our understanding of things. So we're talking about karma. We're talking about the causes of karma. The causes of karma are these 5 poisons. So we just talked about the 3 major poisons. We talked about ignorance, we talked about hatred, and we talked about desire. Now there's also greed and pride. 2 sides of the same hand, so to speak. The greediness that we want things, we attain these things, and we want to keep these things. We don't want to share these things. And then pride comes from that. Maybe these things are more intellectual things, or maybe they're spiritual things. They're accomplishments that we carry about with us. It's not something that we, are wearing nice clothes, or we're driving a nice car, or we have a nice job. It's a pridefulness of my knowledge, a pridefulness of my understanding, something like that. And we can become greedy with it. We are reluctant to share it, for fear that we might lose it. I might be sharing it with somebody who is going to take my job, somebody who is going to take my lover, somebody who is going to take my money, be able to manipulate me, and be able to abscond, embezzle their way into my bank account or something like that. So we become very, very greedy. We hold on to what we got. We don't want to share it. So the antidote for that is generosity, is recognizing that everything that we have is all temporary. It's all impermanent. And if we have the talent to be able to acquire these things, we'll never lose that by sharing it with other people. And by sharing it with other people, we're creating good karma for ourselves. We're doing good deeds. We're being generous with other people. And that is very good. That's very satisfying. And when we do that, we see that other people are growing. Other people are being able to manage their lives in a better way, and using us as maybe an example of that generosity. So it comes back to us in that way. We never lose it. It only increases with us, actually. So when we think about generosity, we need to think about time. We need to think about resources that we have. We need to think about intellectual things, just so many different things that we can spend being generous with people and not being greedy with our time and our resources. So if we seem greedy, then that's what we need to do, is to become generous. The 5th thing here is jealousy. And jealousy and envy are the same thing. Jealousy and envy comes from a feeling, a feeling of inadequacy, of poor self-esteem, that I'm not worthy of being able to attain something or have something. That so I become jealous, I become envious of that which I can't attain. So it becomes very insidious, because it can play in the back of our minds. We don't recognize it, as being there, but yet it's there, and it feeds on itself. It has a feedback loop to it that continues to push us down, to make us feel bad, to make us depressed and so on, because we feel inadequate, that we can't have things. So maybe it's a position of work, maybe it's a lover, maybe it's possessions, maybe it's being able to take on a new project or something like that. And we become envious of people and things that have been able to achieve that and be able to do that and so on. So the antidote to that is starting the endeavor, is to digging in and to say, I'm going to challenge myself and I'm going to try to accomplish this. I'm going to work at this until I do, to have the resolve to say, I'm going to succeed at this. I can do this. I need to do this. Maybe I need some support. Maybe I need to talk to other people that can help me with it. But I'm the person who's in the center of this and can make this happen. And I need to do this, to have the sense of that I can accomplish whatever it is that I want to accomplish. What we may find as we do that is we may get somewhere along that pathway of accomplishing something, only to find that, you know what, it's not what I thought it was. I really don't even need this. It's more trouble than I thought it was going to be. And I need to just tell myself that I need to just stop and pull back. And maybe there was another path for me, and maybe I take that other path, or I find that this one was just the wrong path and I didn't need this in the beginning and I should just go back. I was on the right path the first time, to be able to recognize that. So, but that can couple up with our delusion, with the lies that we tell ourselves. Our ego gets caught up in that and says, oh no, you can't do that. You have to see this thing through. How many people do you know that when they finish high school, young people, they finish high school, they go to college, and their parents have been sending them to a very good school and paying all the money for them to go to school, or maybe you've been working, a job or two, to help pay your way through school for your books and maybe to keep your car and do things like that. And there's a great deal of investment that goes into that, only to find out that you finally get the degree and you say, I really don't like this job. I don't like the people that I'm involved with in this job. I wish I didn't do this. But you get caught up in the lie and say, oh, I'm so invested in that, I got to keep doing this. I got to keep this job. Or maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a marriage or something, that you get involved in a marriage and you say, you know what, I've been in this marriage for so many years or whatever, and I find out I just don't like this person anymore. I've changed, they've changed, our relationship has changed. But you stay in the relationship because of the embarrassment that you might feel for yourself or for others in the minds of others and so on. So the point is that when we're trying to accomplish something, we may find that it's not what we thought it was. And we need to be able to say, okay, I don't need that. And what I accomplished was the wisdom, was the understanding that everything that I see, everything that I want may not be really good for me. So the jealousy that I was feeling, the envy that I was feeling, was just something that was fabricated and we just need to let it rest. On the other hand, we can accomplish that, and maybe we're very successful at that and we're very happy in that. So that can happen too. So the point here in all of this is being able to see what the causes of our karma is. Our karma are the actions we take. We don't take those actions out of thin air. We take those actions out of causes, out of thoughts. Those thoughts are conditioned by certain things that are happening around us, other people, situations. We say that when the conditions are ripe, the seeds will begin to grow. So those seeds that grow can be positive things, they can be negative things. So the causes can be there. And then when the situation is right, when you meet certain people, you may respond in a certain way because of maybe past karma, and you feel excited and you want to do these things. But meanwhile, it may be the very thing that you need to rest, that you need not to do. These are the things that are going to have negative results for you because you're going to take a negative action with them. An example of this is, people that fall into bad friendships, with our kids in particular. And maybe we did it when we were kids. There were kids in the neighborhood that, we were friends with, that we grew up with, and they were just like us and we were happy and things were good. But then somebody new moves in the neighborhood who comes with a different set of ideas, bad ideas. But man, they were a lot of fun. Let's do those things. So that person was like those conditions, and he's bringing in these new ideas of what we can do, these new activities and so on, and we start having these bad results. And then we wind up, getting in trouble with our parents, getting in trouble with the other neighbors, getting in trouble with the police, can happen. So these causes react with these conditions to precipitate these actions that we take. So we need to be ever vigilant and being able to examine what our thoughts are, what our emotions are. And the way to do that is through education, is through loving kindness, is through generosity, is through the 5 antidotes to the 5 poisons. And of course, there are mixtures of them. There's combinations of them. It's not all just clear cut as that. But once we learn these building blocks, now we can begin to build up a catalog, a library of all these different things in the way they operate and the way we react to them. So what we're actually doing is educating ourselves to our emotional development and being able to recognize that and taking responsibility for it. So we can transform negativity into good results. We can also transform good positive intentions that, because of certain conditions, get twisted around, and now we have a bad result. Many good people, like I was pointing out with children, many good kids in the right or in the wrong environment can get turned around and their life starts having a bad result. So I'm sure we've all seen that and so on. And we need to recognize that there's all different degrees of that, and it still happens to us in our lives every day. So the Buddha said many things, but here he said, don't commit wrongdoings. Look and see what virtue is, see what non-virtue is, and don't commit wrongdoings. Wrongdoings are things that cause suffering for ourselves, cause suffering for others. And that we have to develop perfect virtue, perfect positiveness, perfect loving kindness and compassion, bodhicitta, joy, and the sameness, the equanimity, to develop that perfect virtue. And to tame your own mind. To tame your own mind is really the key to all this, to becoming your own Buddha, of recognizing this with yourself. You can't go looking at a book every time you want to figure something out. You have to learn how to trust yourself. You have to learn how to tame your own mind. Your monkey mind is running around with all these different conditions and causes that are coming in and wanting you to make these actions to create this karma. But if we tame our mind and we take our time a little bit more, we simplify more, so many things get solved right within ourselves from the very beginning. So taming our own mind means learning all these different techniques and particularly meditation to be able to contemplate, to be able to think about things, and to always take responsibility for things, not to push responsibility off to other people. Oh, it's their fault. Oh, the kid moved into the neighborhood and he made me do it. The thing is, I did it, and yes, he was a condition that facilitated that, but it was my choice to do that, and I have to take responsibility for that. So we have to learn how to tame our mind. So this is what the Buddha said. Said, do not do wrong deeds, do only good deeds, and tame your mind. So when we talk about karma, we talk about there's virtue, and virtue, it leads to happiness. Non-virtue leads to suffering. And there can be neutral. There can be neutral karma where there's no fruition. It's just a balance. It's just an even thing. And more as we develop into our becoming enlightened beings as practitioners and so on, we find that we're neutralizing more than anything else. We just are learning how to just be neutral, how not to create too much happiness, because too much happiness leads to arrogance, leads to confusion, leads to delusion, so which then in turn turns into suffering for ourselves. We don't want to create too much suffering. But if we find that we can just find this neutral balance of being peaceful, the middle way, this is where the Buddha mind, this is where our self nature is. This is where our mind becomes restful, becomes peaceful, and that we can be calm that way. We can be relaxed that way. And then when things come to us, when we recognize certain situations, we can quickly analyze them and be able to say, oh, I need to act this way, I need to act that way, I need not to act at all, something like that. So we're at peace and being able to be able to judge things and not be able to rush into hasty action. Gary, you had something to say?
Well, isn't that happiness, or what is happiness? I mean, the peaceful, the middle way to me is happiness. Maybe it's an extraneous discussion. I don't want to get into that, but happiness can be delusion.
Well, all these things are conceptual, aren't they?
Yes.
They're all words that we use, and they have many connotations to them. So the point is, in our true mind, we're just relaxed. There's no thought. And when I say that, it means there's no attachment to thought. There's no aversion to thought, because as human beings, it's our natural state of our brain to be thinking all the time. But what we can do is learn to just let those thoughts come and go and not have attachment to them, not have aversion to them. That's the neutrality that I'm talking about. And with that, there is a true happiness, using a conceptual word, to that peace of mind. There's a happiness there that is not the kind of happiness that I'm laughing and I'm singing and I'm throwing money around and I'm hugging everybody. It's not like that. It's just a very peaceful happiness.
Lance, I may be chasing a rabbit here. Earlier, you gave the advantage, the example of a marriage that it sort of turned into a bad karma situation because the two people in the marriage had changed, and it was no longer a harmonious, or whatever the word is, productive situation. And one would think then that that would be a reason to stop that relationship. I've heard people say, I mean, it's just an example, that I've heard people talk about being in what they consider to be an unproductive relationship, but they felt they needed to stay in it because of the children, or because of potential consequences to somebody else. So how does that work with karma, and how do you achieve peace? Or I'm groping for words, but in that kind of situation.
Well, yeah, it's an excellent question, and it's a very dynamic question. There's many things that are involved there. It's a very complicated question, and so you have to find the right balance of all the different situations to be able to decide what's the right solution. Do you create some kind of a temporary peace in your relationship for the sake of the children or whatever? And then you say, okay, when our children turn 18, then we're going to tell them the truth, and we're all going to split up and go our merry ways, and so on like that. So what works for one group of people may not work for another group of people, but it is our responsibility, whatever it is that we do. So if we decide to stay together for the sake of the children, we're responsible for that. And there's a responsibility, to our children. There's a responsibility to us. There's a responsibility to our spouse. There's a responsibility to the children and the rest of the family, and so on. And we have to put that into the equation. If we decide to split up, then we have to take that responsibility too. So there's not a simple answer that works in all situations for everybody. So, but the one thing that is common to all that is taking responsibility by educating ourselves and looking at all the different facets of what the situation is, and trying to make the best decision that you can, and be constantly looking at it, and maybe it needs some tweaks and turns as you progress along in time.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. But the idea that I could be perpetuating a bad karma situation for a higher purpose, or a perceived higher purpose of somebody else's welfare.
Well, that depends too. I mean, take for instance, there's part of the famous story of the Buddha and many other people is that many people will be in a relationship and they have a child, and they decide that they are going to leave the relationship for the sake of their spirituality.
Right.
So here is a very noble cause, but meanwhile they're breaking up their family.
Right.
And many would say they're abandoning, or however, whatever words you want to use for it.
Right.
And you have to take responsibility for that. And maybe under, certain circumstances, certain conditions, that was the right thing to do for them. But on the other hand, it could be wrong circumstances, and you may get unintended consequences, things that you didn't recognize that might happen. Not being there for the child, not being there for the spouse that you're leaving, not being there for the house, and so on like that. So it's not an easy question to answer.
So I could create bad karma out of good intentions, or I don't know. That's what
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
That's right. And you can find that there are ways to mitigate the possibility of non-virtue. So say, let's take for instance, that you're in a family relationship, you have a child and you leave, but meanwhile, you do things to stay in touch. You do things to help the family. You don't totally walk away from the situation. You're still involved, but maybe it's, not being under the same roof and so on like that. So there are things that you can do to mitigate that. And again, you hit the nail on the head by talking about what your intention is, has an awful lot to do with it. If you have the right intention through it all and say, I need to leave this relationship, for noble reasons, but I'm not going to create any more non-virtue than I have to. I'm going to try and maintain a semblance of loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. I'm going to do that.
Well, seems quite compatible with a Christian orientation,
Sure.
using different language and different concepts.
Well, sure. Why not? It's
Yeah.
all the same.
Yeah.
Okay. The essence of Buddhism is the same as the essence of Christianity, which is the same as the essence of Judaism, which is the same as the essence of Hinduism and Islam and every other tradition that I'm aware of.
So there's nothing new under the sun.
There's nothing new under the sun.
Thank you.
So there's unintentional karma, there's intentional karma, and there's no moral consequence karma. Or I should say maybe results. There's unintentional result, there's involuntary result, unintended result, there's intentional result, and then there's no moral consequence at all. So it speaks to positive, negative, and neutral. So we need to be able to examine that. And as we, if we don't learn it from our parents, if we don't learn it from the family, if we don't learn these things at school, usually it is in spiritual context when we learn more about these things. When we get to learn about these things in normal society and so on, it's through our misdeeds, through our errors that we're learning these things. So every family is different, I understand that, but one observation I've had is that, we're not getting the morality teachings at home that I think people could or maybe should. And I think that's part of, we see the political divides that we're experiencing right now. A lot of that has to do, I think, with not having a sense of virtue and non-virtue and what those qualities are and what builds those qualities and what sustains those qualities. And, so how do we fix that? That's got to be part of that equation. It's a karmic question. There's a question full of karma. And it brings me to a point of saying that there is individual karma, that we individually have this karma that we create for ourselves that we can trace. What I did last week or yesterday, or I can see now I'm having the result of that, my guilt. If I did something last week and now I've got this guilt that I'm dealing with because I knew it was wrong. And it's that guilt is just following me all around. And I continue to be confused by it. And now everything that I touch seems to fall apart. And I'm always having bad results. And sometimes we see people who it seems like in their lifetimes, everything they touch just breaks apart. But other people, everything they touch seems to turn to gold. And maybe they're brothers. They grew up in the same family, raised by the same parents in the same house. But here's one child that has one set of circumstances following him all his life, and the other child has a completely different set of circumstances that follow him all his life. We would say bad luck or good luck. or talent or whatever. Some people, two brothers or a brother and a sister, whatever, same house, same family, etc. And one is just born with the ability to be a musician, can play music just beautifully when they were 3 years old, and they always had music in their life and so on. Whereas the other children in the family can't sing a note or play a lick of any instrument. Why? Karma. That we take these karmic seeds with us. We have these karmic seeds with us when we are born, and in the right circumstances, they germinate and they grow and so on like that. Propensities to do good things, propensities to do bad things. So there's this, there's all this stuff that seems to be mystery, all this stuff that seems to be, luck, but it's all karma. So there's this individual karma that we have, but there's also a collective community karma. And that's very interesting. It's very subtle. And for us to be able to recognize it, to be able to really, get peaceful with it, we really have to contemplate it. We really have to transcend our attachments to all these preconceived ideas. How does an airplane with 241 people in it fall out of the sky, and all those people die at the same time and not have some kind of a karmic connection? What is it from past lives that maybe put them in that airplane? All from different countries, different ways of living and so on like that. But they all at this moment had the same thing happen to them. And then they take that and it goes into their next life. Maybe some people are sitting in that plane and they're going frantic. They're just going absolutely bananas. They're crying, so emotional. All kinds of. Some people maybe are praying. Some people maybe are calm. There's all different varying degrees. But whatever they do, whatever they're doing, they're taking that with them. They're taking that confusion into their next life. They're taking that peaceful into their next life. They're taking those prayers into their next life, whatever it is. So to do that, we have to prepare for that. So when we've talked in weeks past and about, that we have the gift of life, we give ourselves this gift of life, but we also give ourselves the gift of death and being able to prepare ourselves for our death. So I'm sure none of us is thinking about going onto an airplane and preparing ourselves for that kind of a death, falling out of the sky, but it's just the point of being peaceful and being able to recognize, that something is immediate and that we're prepared to be able to let go. So this had to do with collective karma, the karma that we're going through now. Politically speaking. And it's in America. It's in the whole world right now. It's never been like this before in this degree in America that we know where it's another civil war. But these things have happened time immemorial. If you read history and any different civilization that you can name, you'll find that there are these vicissitudes of life where there is this, insurrection and civil war and brothers fighting brothers and so on like that. So it's not new stuff. So, from one point of view, we could say, well, this is our turn. And how do we deal with it? And that's a huge question. A very important question, because the way in which we answer that is going to determine what's going to happen with our children and our children's children and their children and so on like that. Does this spiral out of control? Or do we take control of this through loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, and be able to do the hard work that it takes to be able to take all this negativity and transform it into positive virtue, a positive virtuous outcome. And it becomes a point at which history can now point to and say, oh, this is the way this was done here. All these other years, all these other civilizations, all these other peoples always did it. And there was always this kind of an outcome. But here's this time when there was a difference. And what can we learn from that? Does that become a rule for us? Or do we just propagate the conflict? I've mentioned before that there's a great book called The White Hole in Time, written by Peter Russell. And he points out that we look at history based on wars, based on conflict. If you look at national history and so on, all the cataclysms, all the things, all the innovations, all the different things that happen, were in terms of war. But he points out that simultaneously, but not well documented, were times of enlightenment, where many, many people who were living at that time in those same very places, there was a time of enlightenment. But we focus on the more sensational. We focus on the wars. It's more emotional. So then when you examine that, you start looking at that, you say, oh yeah, there's been enlightenment everywhere. And it's been simultaneous with the non-virtuous things. So people made choices. People made choices to engage in the war, the conflict. Some people made choices to engage in the enlightenment. So where are we in our conflict? Becomes the question. So we engage with this through our three doors. How do we engage in life? We engage through the three doors. The three doors are our body, our speech, and our mind. Om Ahom. Our body is our physicality. Our body is our home. Our body is our environment. Our body is all part of that phenomenal nature that has materialistic qualities to it, substantial matter, and so on. The speech is representative, is part of, is the expression of our intellect. We can't speak if we didn't have our intellect. We can't have language if we didn't have intellect. We wouldn't be able to understand ourselves. We wouldn't be able to understand each other, and so on. So when we say speech, speech is, we're talking about the intellect, our brain, which is locked in our body. When our body dies, our brain goes too. And the speech goes, the intellect goes, all the memories go. Our mind, when we talk about mind in this case, we're talking about our heart mind. And it's not the fleshy heart, that's our body. We're talking about our spiritual heart, which is in the center of our body, and that we have with us. So we talk about heart thoughts. We talk about a heart mind. This is our big mind. This is our little mind. It's figurative. It's symbolic. It's part of the phenomenal nature of being a human being. But everything that we do, we're doing with our body, our speech, and our mind. We may not be aware of it. You know, most of us are just doing things with our physical body and with our intellect. And we completely suppress any idea of spiritual mind. Maybe it hasn't been introduced to us. We haven't discovered it. Or maybe we've had epiphanies, we've had moments of it, but we didn't have words to be able to comprehend what it was. We didn't have the concept of what this was. Or maybe we just dismissed it with love and kindness and virtue and happiness and so on, and didn't go any further than that. But we talk about that we have these three bodies: the physical body, the intellectual body, and the spiritual body. The physical body and the intellectual body are completely temporary. The physical body, or excuse me, the spiritual body is something that is running through in a continuum that we begin to recognize by transcending our physical body and our intellectual body. And we use it as a simile to be able to understand that which is unknowable by us as human beings. When I say unknowable, I mean it's unintelligible. We can't qualify it. We can't know it in the same way that we know other things. It's not tangible. But yet we can experience it. So this is what being a spiritual being is all about, is being able to unlock our awareness of that spirituality, what we call spirituality, which is another conceptual word that we use to, mean something to us. So it's our body, speech, and mind that is the actor in all these permutations, all these possibilities of things that we do that are steeped in karma, cause, and result. So once again, we have to take responsibility for that. We have to understand that, So what we have been doing, when we close our practices for the evening, our teachings for the evening, we do Om Ah Hung in the body, speech, and mind. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones, because they are pure virtue. They are something that is beyond what we recognize as being human. It takes a human to be able to experience that, but the human brain cannot comprehend what it is, but we can experience it, and it begins to condition us. We use it to condition those causes that are coming in, so that our karma, our actions, are now conditioned by our spirituality. And now we start having spiritual outcomes, spiritual results. And they can say, oh yeah, so-and-so is a very spiritual being. How do I know that? Because I see what they say. I see what they do. I see their generosity. I see their education. I see their objectivity. I see their work ethic, their accomplishments. They're all steeped in what we would call spirituality. So there's another simile that says, the means of engaging in all actions, whether virtuous or non-virtue, the means of engaging in all actions, whether they're either virtue or non-virtue. We're just getting it down to that duality there. So engaging in non-virtuous action is like taking poison. It's going to kill us. It's going to make us sick. It's going to injure us. And maybe not what we think is temporary. We may recover from it, but this kind of action, this kind of non-virtuous action can ruin us for the rest of our lives. That we have this now to deal with the rest of our lives. Engaging in virtuous action is like taking medicine. So whatever illnesses we have, whatever non-virtue we have, whatever defilements that we have created for ourselves over this lifetime and past lifetimes, past karma and so on, our virtue is medicine for that, is healing that. If we learn that we're here on this planet, in this life, at this time, and so on, and how we got here is very subtle. We may never know. But one thing we do know, that this is samsara. This is the ocean of suffering. And I'm here for a reason. I'm here for a reason that I chose. Maybe you think it was a gift. Maybe you think it was a curse. Maybe it was a little bit of both. But why we're here is not as important at this point now as it is as to what we are going to do now for the sake of others in the future and for sake of others in our midst right now. That's what's important. So that's where the virtue actualizes or kicks in. That becomes the object of our virtue, is what's happening now. So that no matter what it was that brought us here, whether we thought it's a curse or whether we thought it's a gift, now we're taking that. We're taking both of those ideas. We're applying more virtue to it so that we have a strong virtuous outcome. So it's like taking medicine. So some people would say, oh, I don't believe in karma because I can't see it. You know, how can you, what does it mean? And we say that, karma is a natural law. There's natural laws that we abide by all the time. We may not understand them completely, but yet we know that they're true. Why is it we're not flying off into space every moment? Because of the natural law of gravity. It's invisible, but we know it's there. And I can prove it by, weighing things and doing stuff that we did in 8th grade physics classes and stuff like that. Yeah, there's gravity. And what about if I stand out in the sky and on the ground when it starts thunderstorming and there's lightning, and here comes this lightning and strikes me, electrocutes me, and so on. I can prove that there's that, and I can go stick my finger in the electric socket, or I can take the lamp cord and I can peel back the insulation and I can go touch those wires and I get an electric shock. Electromagnetic natural law. It's invisible, but yet I can prove it. But then there's karmic natural law. Karma, cause and effect natural law. It's invisible too. But we can see those that have what we call bad luck and good luck. We can see those who are always making good choices and bad choices. those who are having good results and negative results. We can see that. And for some people, we may be able to have enough wisdom to be able to see it ourselves, what they're doing to themselves. But if you try and explain it to them, no, they won't get it. They'll deny it. They'll say, oh, it's not true. So there's a spiritual law, the law of karma. You know, and we grew up with, you know, sayings like, you know, what you do is going to come back on you. The golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, things like that. So these are things that have been in our culture for forever. People recognize this. But yet there is this, you know, it's not taught in a way of personal responsibility. You know, we're trying to really crystallize it. We're really trying to connect the dots with this, with karma, cause and effect. And this is one of the benefits of this Buddhist tradition, I think, is it does such a good job at things, how to predict these things, how to take responsibility for these things. I don't think every tradition does that. Maybe they do, but maybe it's more subtle. You know, for myself, maybe I didn't go to the right teachers, but I didn't see it. So sometimes we get karma that comes, or the results of karma comes to us very quickly. Sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's very slow. Sometimes it seems to be over lifetimes. And that's the subtlety, you know, and that takes, you know, our transcendence of our ordinary minds and processing what we think is time, what we think phenomenal nature is, and being able to look at it from a different point of view, something other than a human point of view. We can't see our past lifetimes. We don't see, you know, we're trying to see our lifetimes in terms of, oh, who was I in 1823 living in India or living in America or living in South America or wherever, you know, trying to be specific. Oh, I was in this other body. I was a woman. Oh, I did this kind of work. I did that kind of work, you know, something like that. You know, we want to qualify it in those kinds of ways because that's what human beings do. We want to objectify I, me, mine all the time. But if we can suspend that, our attachment to that, let that go, and we can see this continuum that goes through, that is this transpersonal continuum. That there was a lot of people living in 1823 that were going through all different kinds of things. And I was part of that. We're all part of that. We're all part of this cosmic display of stuff. Some of it is matter, some of it is energy. You know, so we're all part of it. But to be able to see it in non-specific terms, but know that it is part of us. We are part of it. We speak of it symbolically. And be able to see that the karma, the actions, the results of the actions that were happening in 1823 have gone through these vicissitudes, and we're just seeing more ripples in the pond. It's like taking a placid pond, perfectly flat, and then taking a rock and throwing it in the center, and the rock splashes in the center, and then there are these, you know, concentric rings that go out until finally it calms down and so on. So in the course of 3 or 4 minutes, maybe that'll happen. But what about, that happening in our phenomenal nature, over the course of millions and billions of years? We just don't see it that way. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen that way. So we look at things as being immediate, we look at things being slow, and we look at things being totally indeterminate. We can't recognize these things. So, the things that just happened, well, it's easy to say that, oh, the police are chasing me all the time because I mugged somebody last week. Now I'm always looking over my shoulder thinking that the police are going to come get me, or somebody's big brother is going to come and beat the heck out of me because I mugged his sister. That's an immediate karma reaction, right? You can track that. But then there's something that might have happened when we were 5 years old or something, and something that happened to us, and we're suffering the results of that now. And what did that 5-year-old kid do to have that happen to them? And the one over many lifetimes is completely invisible to us, but it's a matter of perspective. It's a matter of being able to look at it from another point of view, a transcendent point of view. So there's another aspect to this, to karma, and that is something, somebody mentioned earlier before about mitigating circumstances. That sometimes that there is a, excuse me a second here. I want to make a point. I want to get it right. That there's 3 types of karma fruition. The fruition of a direct result, where, like I said, I mugged somebody, now the police is chasing me, the big brother is chasing me, I can track that very easily. There's a residual result that manifests as an experience or as a proclivity, maybe the example being an artist of some type or another, because I studied hard and learned how to develop a talent, a skill, and so on. And that stays with me and can pop up when the conditions are right, and now I've got this life and now I can be a great artist, or I can paint, I can play music and so on like that. I can't track it back. I can't see that, but for me, it's happening. And there's the conditional result, which is our environment. That if maybe I got a neutral ability to play music, but my mother and father were playing music always in the house, and my aunts and uncles would come over. It was a musical family, and I learned through them. I just happened to be like clay. I didn't have any talent myself, but I just learned it all through them. So the environment was bringing it to us. So what determines the strength of karma is a big question. So sometimes there, well, what if there are mitigating circumstances? What if, I had the right intention, but circumstances turned out bad and I had this bad result or something like that? So there's 4 aspects to karmic action. So first, there has to be a basis. So what that means is there has to be an object of the karma. So maybe it's doing a good deed or doing a bad deed. There has to be an object. I'm going to mug this person, or I'm going to help this person across the street who's carrying a bunch of grocery bags or something like that. There has to be an object of the karma. And then there has to be an intention to want to do the action, to do the karma. I want to help that person who's got those bags. I want to help them cross the street. Or I know that person is carrying a bunch of money in their pocket and I want to rob them. So I have to have the intention. Rebecca likes that.
It just seems so wrong to hear you say that. I think I'll mug him. It's just out of character.
You never know about anybody.
Oh dear.
So you got to have the intention, you got to have the basis. Then you have to do the action. So having a thought is one thing. And having a thought, there is a consequence to that. But to do the karma, to have the karma really come to fruition, you have to carry it out. So I have to mug the person. I have to help the person. I have to take the bags and help the lady cross the street. So you got to carry it out. And then the fourth aspect is you got to have the full result. You have to take satisfaction for it. So in the case of the mugging, hey, I got the money. I'm really happy I got the money. I have no feeling for the person that I just robbed and hurt and mugged and knocked down on the ground. I'm happy I got the money. Maybe I'm happy I knocked that person down. Or that you're happy and you're satisfied, you feel good that you helped that person across the street with their packages. So there has to be the satisfaction. You have to take satisfaction in what it is that you did. So there has to be an object. There has to be an intention. There has to be the commitment or the actualization of the basis and the action. And then there has to be a satisfaction with it. So any of those things can be, the intensity can be changed in any one of those things, and it can mitigate the result of the karma, the imprint that stays with the actualizer of the karma, of the action. So maybe I did these things and my intention to mug was because my family was starving and I knew no other way other than robbing this person of some money. My intention was to rob it and then go into the store and buy them food and take it home. So, that brings down the karmic result to some degree. Not a lot, but to some degree. You can go to prison for it. You can cause a lot of harm. That person could die when they hit the ground. I didn't intend to kill that person. It was an accident. All I wanted was their money, but they fought me. And when they hit the ground, they busted their head and they died. I didn't mean to do that. Do you go to hell? Because you took a life? Well, maybe. What kind of a hell is it? Is it a hell that you're always feeling that emotion for the rest of your life and it stays with you? It like haunts you the whole rest of your life. And maybe you take it with you into the next life and so on. Did you do anything to make amends for that? Did you do anything to try and use virtue in another way to be able to help? So there's different things that we can do to help us through that karma, be it positive or negative karma, virtuous or non-virtuous karma. So it says when all four actions of when all four aspects of an action are complete, the action will carry its full karmic weight. But if any of them are incomplete, the karmic weight will be lessened. So that's the point I was just making. So there's many factors happening, you know, in phenomenal nature, there's so many things happening. In primordial awareness, in our true nature, the mind is at rest. The mind is quiet. Why do we put ourselves through all this stuff? You know? Why do we attach to these things? Why do we cling to these things? Why do we allow ourselves to have these aversions, these hatreds? Why do we allow these neurotic jealousies develop in our minds? You know, all because of identity. We all, you know, secretly we relish all of this.
Don't you think that we're taught more hatred than, don't you think that's a taught thing?
I think a large part of it, yes, but I do think that there are proclivities.
I didn't quite
There are
understand that.
proclivities.
Tendency to.
You know, some people take two brothers growing up in the same household, you know, born a year or two apart from each other, and one becomes, you know, a very good kid, and the other one is just always getting into trouble and doing terrible things all the time. They grew up in the same house, they went to the same school, they had the same teachers, but one had a proclivity to do virtuous deeds and the other had a proclivity to do non-virtuous deeds. And it's invisible to us. But if, once again, you know, talking about if we could transcend, we could see that there are karmic seeds that each of those two children are carrying with them, that when the conditions are ripe, they begin to blossom and grow. Maybe I should have said germinate and grow would be the best way to say it. But that's the answer to it. You know, and karma is a very difficult thing for people to accept. And everybody comes up with all these, you know, what ifs and so on like that. But the more that we think about it, remember, this is what keeps us, this is one of the four thoughts that turn our mind to the Dharma. When we begin to look at these things in light of the Dharma, when the Dharma becomes the wisdom light in which we examine these things, not for one day, not for 1 week, not for a month or for a year, but for a lifetime, when we spend now the rest of our lives contemplating this along with many other things, we begin to see the pieces fitting together. But here is the law. Now you need to learn how to put it together so that you can see how it works and everything. But, you know, we talk about, you know, the 2,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. We get the frame, we get the corner pieces. That's easy to do. Now we look at all the internal stuff and so on. So this is some of the internal stuff, and this is some of the most subtle of the internal stuff, the most difficult to be able to abide by. Why? Because it makes us responsible. And our ego does not want to be responsible. It just wants the glory.
Well,
So what do you think about this?
Lance, I find it very interesting when you're talking about siblings that are so very different from each other, that they both have, and I think we somehow choose the family that we're born into, that they're both born into the same family.
That's right.
I know my sister and I were worlds apart in differences, but raised the same way with the same parents, and but totally different people.
Yeah. And one could have had a total volition to be born in that family, and the other one could have just, tumbled into it for other circumstances that can't be fathomed.
Yeah, okay.
And the more that we learn about Dharma, we learn about seeing those things. That's what the Bardo Total is all about. Rebecca, what do you think? I love talking to Rebecca.
I'm still over here giggling at the idea of you going, I'm gonna go mug him. Well, I find myself thinking that the same family, this idea that, like, two children choose this family and one of them's good and one of them's not so good. What if for one of them that family is heaven and the other one is hell? Two people dealing with their streams of whatever from past lives that they have to deal with in the same circumstances. It could be very positive and very negative for completely incomprehensible reasons.
Well, that's right. Yeah, that's true.
I've seen that on a number of occasions. I've known, I can think of a family where there was a tyrant at the head of the family, and there were a number of children, several, and everybody fell right in line with the tyrant. I was not involved, but I knew of it. And there was one outlier who rebelled for what they thought was right, while everybody else fell in line with the tyrant and even lied to support him and lied about the outlier. I remember that very vividly. And I knew enough about it to know what was going on. And I've seen examples of that in various ways repeatedly in my life, and there was no explaining why the outlier knew what was right and why the outlier rebelled and why the outlier eventually just left. There are examples of that all over the country where there are these divisions in families, and someone just won't have it, but everybody else plays along for whatever their reasons are. They could be material or they could be otherwise. A need for approval, whatever. What motivates someone who comes out of, the same womb, same genetics, in the same familial social environment in school, but someone to look and say, no, there's a reason, and I think it's embedded in a lot of the things that we've been talking about, and it's a matter of putting it together. But what you're saying is making sense to me. The why is something I'm still in pursuit of, although I'm not sure I need to be in pursuit of it. It just is.
And Gary, I guess I was thinking of something not as, black and white, good and bad, but just simply, the family that I grew up in, for me was painful for reasons, and for my younger brother was fine. and the environment was the same, right? The way that they treated me and the way that they treated him were very, very similar. And for whatever reason, what I have to assume, whatever I sort of carried into this life, I had to deal with something that was triggered by my experience of a particular family member. And it's not a good, bad, they were a tyrant, or they were, evil, or they were mean spirited. They were just a personality type that clearly I needed to go deal with something about. That I keep finding myself bringing up in my life. So it's, and one of my notes here as we've been talking is, holy cow, maybe this entire life was set up for me to deal with that and resolve it so I could leave it behind.
Could be. It could be. There are some things now at this stage of my life that are occurring to me that I don't know why it wasn't, that seemed to be so clear. And you've known me a long time. I've done a lot of things in my occupation and my work and in my involvement that required some pretty strong thinking. And why weren't these simple things obvious to me, or are they so simple? There's a type of clarity that is coming to me. Maybe during what we've been going through, I've had a lot more time to think without interruption. But it seems that why didn't I understand this when I was 30? I was doing very challenging things when I was 30. Why didn't I understand some things about life that would have made it so much easier for me then that I understand now, that don't seem difficult to understand? And this experience with this Sangha has helped me a great deal to step back from a lot of things.
Do you think that there were times in your life, when you were 30 or, in your 20s or whatever, there were like defining moments? There were, there were crossroads that maybe you did have an opportunity to go down, a different path, but you chose the path that you did, but yet you didn't recognize that other choice, or you didn't understand it in its entirety, but you still can go back and you can still say, oh yeah, that was one of those defining moments.
Yeah.
Yes,
Ed,
there have been several,
that kind of thing.
yes, sometimes, often circumstances at your point in life dictate that you have to make a choice of some sort. And you may not realize all the choices that are there for you. You confine yourself to a set of choices that are not expansive enough. But I think there's more to it than that. I think that the life we have lived, this uber competitive environment that we've been brought up in, a complex society, has directed us sometimes to make, for instance, one choice is, if I have more happiness, I'll just use a word, there are many words I could use. If I have more, then ipso facto, someone has to have less. We live in a world like that. At least I've seen that in this country. We live in at least we are taught sometimes that we live in a world like that. But now, as I've gotten older, I've discovered some time ago that that's a false choice. That's a false paradigm. that most of the time, less is really better. More is more complicated.
That's indeed right.
I should stop while I'm ahead if I am ahead.
That begs the question, knowing that, we'll be born again in some way, how would you want to be born? You want to be born just as you were born this time in the same set of circumstances? Or do you want to be born in a more complex situation or a simpler situation? And if it's more complex, what does that mean? And if it's simpler, what does that mean? I've been reading some history, some Dharma history, Tibetan history, and so on. And as I pointed out earlier, that mankind has always been going through these vicissitudes, these cyclic changes and so on. And there was this particular period of time where it was almost civil war in Tibet. And the people who, for a couple of generations, more than a couple of generations, and the people that had some power to be able to help, this either break completely apart or to bring it together, chose to bring it together. And how did they bring it together? By really instilling the discipline aspect of reconnecting with the monastic culture, doubling down on monastery. For us, we may say, oh, well, I'm not going down that path. I want to be free. I want to have 3 cars. I want to have all these clothes. I want to get married. I want to have all this sex. I want all this stuff. I don't want to go that way. But meanwhile, huh?
You're doing it again.
I'm doing it again, right? But on the other hand, what came out of that was this great spiritual discovery, this great spiritual pathway that only could be done by consolidating all this energy, developing all this one-pointed mindfulness, not just in one person or 2 or 3, but in a whole culture of people. And does that speak to possibilities for what we need today? What will it take for us to get to that decision point? How much more suffering will there have to be? Well, if I can use the January 6th example, they don't stop. Does that become a point, or was what we saw enough? So they're interesting questions, aren't they?
Well, January 6th revealed something that was already there, and it did not expend itself on January the 6th. And so we have to deal with that. It's just an example of a bizarre example, the worst example of the chaos that we deal with sometimes internally and in groups every day. It's just the worst example. We're dealing with that inner chaos.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're getting near the end here, so I want to leave a few minutes if anybody else has anything that you want to add to the conversation. Zara, Ed, Michael, Thomas, please.
I think you might think more about karma And this January 6th, just as an example, the January 6th event was 4 years in the making. That you found people were talking about doing something, and then finally, when they got to this point, they went into the Capitol, and then they went in and they did the deed that happened. But that January 6th karma event was building for the last 4 years.
Oh.
So
It
Well-
was building, and as Gary said, it was a reflection of what was already there. But still it was something different. I mean, the seeds were all there, the causes were there, but
it's still going.
January 6th is the time that it precipitated into action. That's a different stage. I mean, it's sort of like the step from intention to action in the
It's still going.
Yeah, it's still going, but I still think January 6th was a marker event.
Yes.
I mean, it was a time when the transition was made from intention to action. And
Well-
lots of things, thankfully, never get beyond the intention stage.
So let me ask it this way. Those people that did that, I mean, they've got the karma, to as a result of that.
Right.
But what about people like us who witness this?
Right.
Are we victims? And if we're not victims, or do we contribute to what happens next?
Yep.
In one way or the other. Do we find a way to bring people together, or do we find a way to just further the chasm between people? And are we responsible for that?
I've been in a series of workshops lately on racial reconciliation, and the distinction is made between an overt racist and a complicit racist. And I am not an overt racist. But I am probably a complicit racist, in that I live and perhaps benefit from a society, I mean, which is biased in my favor.
I think we're all racist.
Yeah,
From that point of view, we're all racist. We can't help it. We've been conditioned.
Yeah. But
So I came to the understanding this week that I am a racist, and I went to TC Williams. My dad was the president of the PTA the year of the events of Remember the Titans, right? I mean, I grew up in Alexandria. There's a lot of sort of racial stuff that has had me believe that I wasn't a racist.
Yeah.
I tripped over an interesting book that I'll just recommend. Just came out. It's called Robert E. Lee and Me. It's by a guy named
Yeah.
Ty Sigely. Ty Sigely was my best friend's older brother when I was like 6. And I heard his name and went and looked up the book, and it looked interesting. So I'm reading it. And it's about him being raised in Alexandria in sort of a very overt environment of systemic civil war aggrandizement, and coming to terms with it. And it's amazing. But in the middle of it, I'm just sitting there going, oh, yeah, I really am. It was life-changing for me.
Yeah.
The last 4 years lanced a boil that has been pulsing and growing for centuries. And many of us had satisfied ourselves that we were on the right side of the issue, that we understood when we really didn't. When I was 9 years old in Greater Little Rock, I saw blacks being thrown down the steps of the high school that I was to attend years later. You know, and of course I was raised in Jim Crow, and I didn't understand why they wanted to go to our schools and worship in our places. I mean, that was life the way it was supposed to be lived in the eyes of a 9-year-old boy who had been taught that that was the way life was supposed to be lived. And we spend the rest of that to now we're unlearning that. And now we're finally identifying with what they have been going through. We passed all these laws. The last thing I'll say is the story of a friend of mine who was black, and we were walking down the aisle of a hex in Arlington. There was a hex in Arlington. Some of you may remember it. And I had noticed that there was someone that seemed to be stalking us, tracking us. And I told my black friend that I think that that guy is following us. And he said, he just shook his head. He said, you don't understand yet. He's not following you. He's following me. Well, I was going to go turn and tell that guy about the law and stuff like that. And my friend just grabbed me by the arm and took me right out of the store so that we both wouldn't end up in jail. He said, do you realize that the American Nazi Party's headquarters is a mile from here? It was in Arlington then. And he told me, he said, you don't understand how life is. You think that you've learned all these things. You're an educated man. You're going to go talk to that guy about the Civil Rights Act of 1964, not understanding he doesn't give a damn. You don't understand how the world is. And it took me a long time after that to really understand. And what we're trying to understand, I think, in the life we're trying to live now, is how the world really is and how we ought to be. You can't pass a bunch of acts and satisfy yourself that everything's okay and then go off and live your life. You know, I read a book called Black Like Me by John Howard Griffin. It's an old book. You ought to find it and read it.
I read it, yeah.
Yeah.
Years ago.
It's a great book.
Yeah.
Very, very briefly, the guy literally was a white man who spent a long time doing a lot of things to change his complexion so he would pass. And he actually rode on buses and things, and you can help me here a little bit because it's been decades since I've read it. Rode through the South and through the country and passed as a black man. He tried, and this was back long enough, but he tried to ride in the front of the bus and got his comeuppance, and he was treated. And he had the experience of someone who was like that. And then he wrote a book called Black Like Me. And I think that that this attaches to what we're trying to understand is what life is really like for our brothers and sisters everywhere. How well we have it, and how closed and lost we have been in our thinking. That we were doing all the right things in lives of social service, lives of public service. We were checking our boxes. At least I was. I shouldn't speak for all of you. I haven't lived your lives. But we were doing all these things, and then all of a sudden you're in the latter part of your life and you realize you've been going through the motions.
Amen.
You've been on a treadmill. Disappointing. But it's better to realize it at some point than never.
Amen.
All right. Well, thank you. Let's bring this to a close. If anybody does have something they want to say that hasn't spoken yet, we'll make another minute, but otherwise, let's do our dedication. So,
Dedication prayers.
yes, sir.
The lineage dedication prayer. Dorje Chang Nilopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Dharma Lord Gampopa, Pagmodrupa, and Lord Rinkumpa, Please bestow upon us the most auspicious blessing of all the Kagyu Lamas. By this virtue may I achieve the all-knowing state. May all who travel on the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating all enemies, confusion, cause of suffering. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have long life. I pray that your Dharma activities spread far and wide. I pray that I might not be separated from you. As Manjushri, the warrior, realized the ultimate state, and as did Samantabhadra, I will follow in their path and fully dedicate all the merit for all sentient beings. By the blessings of the Buddha who attained the three kayas, by the blessing of the truth of the unchanging Dharma as such, by the blessing of the indivisible Sangha order, may the merit I share bear fruit. The Karma prayer. By the virtues collected in the three times by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate root of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Drinkumpa Ratna Shri, who is omniscient Lord of the Dharma, master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. Dedication prayer. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, bodhisattvas, yogins, yoginis, and dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions. Please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana and the innate root of virtue not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Shavaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading maras, and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise even for a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that, may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great numinosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, ah, hom. Om, ah, hom. Om, ah, hom. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones.
Thank you all very much. Good participation. Good talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lance.
Welcome.
Lance,
Next week, yes?
sorry, I was going to ask, will you be on for this Saturday?
This Saturday, we're starting Noble Film Night.
Oh,
We'll
okay.
be showing a film called Milarepa.
Okay.
is going to be excellent. So
Okay.
7 o'clock.